the silence in Alina Vance's house wasn't peaceful. It was a physical presence, as heavy and suffocating as a shroud. It had seeped into the walls, settled on the furniture, and coated every surface in a fine layer of gray, colorless dust that only she could see. It was the silence of a life that had ended too soon, the silence of a future that had been stolen. It was the silence of her 10-year-old grandson, Leo. I want you to picture this. A woman, 68 years old, a retired librarian who spent her entire life organizing the world into neat, understandable categories, now faced with a loss so chaotic it defied all systems. And in her hand, she holds the one thing that was supposed to prevent this silence. The thing that was supposed to scream a warning but instead whispered nothing. I'm Serena, and on Revenge Pains today, we are delving into a story about a quiet grandmother who turned her grief into a weapon and proved that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or influence, it's information. 2 months after the funeral, the silence was at its loudest. The official cause of death was a sudden cardiac event. A freak tragedy, the doctors had said. A 1 in a million anomaly in an otherwise healthy boy. Alina knew the statistics, of course. She was a research librarian. Statistics were her trade. But when the 1 in a million is the only one who matters, the numbers become meaningless. Her days fell into a muted rhythm, a ritual of containment. She would wake, dress in shades of charcoal and ash, and begin her work. Not the work of dusting or cleaning, but the work of archiving. She was archiving Leo. His life, once a vibrant, sprawling narrative, was now being condensed into a series of labeled, acid-free boxes. His crayon drawings, with their fantastically lopsided suns and stick-figure superheroes, were interleaved with archival paper. His collection of strangely shaped rocks, each one a treasure from a walk in the park, was catalogued by size and origin. His favorite worn-out t-shirts, still smelling faintly of him, of boyish sweat and summer grass, were folded into airtight bags. It was a librarian's habit applied to the most profound grief, a desperate attempt to impose order on the ultimate disorder. She moved through the house like a ghost, her footsteps absorbed by the thick carpets. In the living room, Leo's gaming console sat dark and cold. The controllers were still on the floor where he'd left them, a silent testament to a game paused forever. Her gaze would drift to the small, sleek black box on the mantelpiece, the charging station for his Omni band. The device itself sat next to it, a smooth, dark gray loop of silicone and metal. Omni Med Solutions had marketed it as the parental peace of mind we've all been waiting for. A revolutionary smart health monitor for children. It tracked heart rate, sleep patterns, blood oxygen, everything. Its main selling point, the reason her daughter, Leo's mother, Sarah, had bought it, was the advanced alert system. It was supposed to detect any dangerous arrhythmia, any cardiac anomaly, and send an immediate, unmissable alarm to the parents' phones and the device itself. It was supposed to be a guardian angel, a digital sentinel watching over their precious boy. But on that Tuesday afternoon, as Leo sat reading in his room, his heart had simply stopped. The Omni band on his wrist had remained silent. Sarah's phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, had never rung. The guardian angel had been sleeping. Alina picked up the device. It was cool and inert in her palm. She traced the seamless edge where the screen met the silicone band. To the world, it was a marvel of modern technology. To her, it was an artifact of failure. She clutched it, her knuckles white, feeling the ghost of Leo's small wrist against her skin. The grief was a physical ache in her chest, a hollow space that echoed with the silence. But as she stood there, turning the useless piece of technology over and over in her hand, another feeling began to stir beneath the thick, cold sludge of sorrow. It was a tiny, sharp splinter of ice. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something quieter, more methodical. It was suspicion. Librarians, after all, don't just organize information. They question it. And the story she was being told about Leo's death, the story of a freak accident and a flawless piece of technology, had a footnote that just didn't add up. 2 weeks later, a thick, glossy envelope arrived. It bore the logo of Omni Med Solutions, a stylized O encircling a soothing, abstract heartbeat. Inside was a letter drafted by their legal department. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, filled with phrases like deepest sympathies, unforeseeable tragedy, and in the spirit of compassionate resolution. It spoke of their commitment to their customers and their profound sorrow for her family's loss. Tucked within this verbose sympathy card was a legal document and a check. The check was for a staggering amount of money, enough to pay off her daughter's mortgage, fund a college education for her other grandchildren, and ensure a comfortable life for years to come. It was presented not as an admission of guilt, but as a goodwill gesture. Attached to this gesture, however, was a dense, ironclad non-disclosure agreement. The NDA was 19 pages long. It forbade Alina, her daughter Sarah, and any member of their family from ever speaking publicly about Leo, the Omni Band, or the circumstances of his death. It prevented them from participating in any lawsuit, speaking to the media, or even mentioning the device in a negative light on any social media platform, forum, or online review site, in perpetuity. To sign it was to accept the money and agree to let Leo's death be erased, to become an official, state-sanctioned secret. Alina's lawyer, a pragmatic man named Arthur who had handled her late husband's will, reviewed the document. He sat across from her in his polished mahogany office, the check lying on the desk between them like an unholy offering. "Alina, this is a very generous offer," Arthur said, his voice calm and reasonable. "I've reviewed the NDA. It's standard for these kinds of situations. It's restrictive, yes, but the compensation is significant." "They're trying to buy our silence," Alina stated, her voice flat. It wasn't a question. "They're trying to mitigate their legal exposure," he corrected gently. "Look, from a legal standpoint, proving the device was at fault would be an uphill battle. A very long and very expensive battle. You'd be up against one of the largest tech companies in the world. They have armies of lawyers. They will say it was a pre-existing condition, an anomaly, anything. They will drag your family through the mud. This settlement, it's a guaranteed win. It provides for Sarah. It's what Leo would have wanted." What Leo would have wanted. The words hung in the air, stale and wrong. Leo would have wanted to turn 11. He would have wanted to go to space camp. He would have wanted to grow up. "It feels wrong," Alina said, her gaze fixed on the check. It looked obscene. "Grief makes a lot of things feel wrong," Arthur replied, his tone laced with practiced sympathy. "My advice, as your lawyer and as your friend, is to sign it. Take the money. Focus on your family. Let yourselves heal." But Alina wasn't listening. A librarian's mind is trained to see patterns, to follow threads, to look for the information that isn't there. An unsolicited 7-figure settlement offer wasn't a goodwill gesture. It was a panic move. It was the frantic tidying up of a potential mess. Why would a company offer so much money for a death they claimed was a tragic accident, completely unrelated to their product? It was like finding a rare first edition inexplicably on the discount rack. Something was out of place. That night, she sat at her computer, the house dark and silent around her. The glowing screen cast a pale blue light on her face, illuminating the lines of exhaustion and resolve etched around her eyes. She put aside her grief-driven archiving and began a different kind of research. Her fingers, usually gentle on the spines of old books, moved with a new, sharp precision across the keyboard. She started with simple searches. Omni-band issues, Omni-med complaints, Omni-band failure. The results were a wall of polished corporate PR, glowing reviews, and paid articles from tech influencers. Omni-med had clearly invested a fortune in managing its online reputation. The first 10 pages of Google were a pristine digital facade. But Alina was a research librarian. She knew that the most valuable information is rarely on the first 10 pages. She started using advanced search operators, filtering by date, searching for cached pages of websites that no longer existed. She dug into niche medical tech forums, parenting blogs, and social media groups, using keywords she knew a grieving parent might use, words like heartbreak, angel. Why? For hours, she found nothing but dead ends. Then, deep in the archives of a little-known tech gadget forum, she found it. A post from 8 months ago. The username was Broken Heart Dad. The post was short, frantic, and desperate. "My daughter, she had an Omni-band, wore it every day. Last week she had a seizure. The doctors said her heart stopped. The band didn't make a sound. Nothing. They're telling us it was something called SADS. Has this happened to anyone else? They're trying to make us sign something." Below the post, there were only 2 replies. The first said, "So sorry for your loss, man." The second was from a forum moderator. "This post has been flagged for violating community guidelines regarding unverified medical claims." Alina tried to click on the user's profile, Broken Heart Dad. The link was dead. "This user account has been deleted," the screen read. She went back to the post. She hit refresh, and just like that, it was gone. "This thread is no longer available." A cold dread trickled down her spine, but it was quickly followed by that familiar sliver of ice. They were not just buying silence. They were actively scrubbing it, deleting it, erasing the digital footprints of grieving parents. This wasn't just about mitigating legal exposure anymore. This was a cover-up. She looked at the 19-page NDA sitting on her desk, at the obscene check beside it. Arthur's advice echoed in her head. Let yourselves heal. But healing wasn't possible when the wound was still being salted. Justice, she realized, had to come before peace. The next morning, she called Arthur. "I'm not signing it," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Alina, please, let's be rational about this." "I am being rational, Arthur. I am being a librarian, and this particular collection has a missing volume. I intend to find it." She hung up the phone. The silence in her house was still there, still heavy. But now it wasn't just the silence of absence. It was the silence before a storm. Alina Vance, retired research librarian, had just checked out a new book, The Truth, and she wouldn't rest until she had read it from cover to cover. Now I want to pause here for a second, because this is a critical moment. Think about it. A huge, life-changing sum of money, an army of lawyers on the other side. A lawyer and friend telling you to take the easy way out. Most people would sign. Most people would take the check and try to forget. But Alina wasn't most people. She chose the harder path, the one that leads through the dark woods instead of around it. She chose to honor her grandson not by accepting a payout for his death, but by fighting for the meaning of his life. That decision, right there, is the one that changes everything. Alina's refusal to sign the NDA was a quiet declaration of war. OmniMed Solutions responded not with a bang, but with a chilling silence. The generous offer was rescinded. The sympathetic tone vanished. It was a clear message. You are on your own. For Alina, this was a confirmation, not a deterrent. She dove into her investigation with the methodical patience she had honed over 40 years of navigating the labyrinthine corridors of information. The deleted forum post was her only lead, a ghost in the machine. She knew that to find others, she couldn't use a public square like Google. She had to find the hidden courtyards, the secret gardens of the internet where frightened people gathered. She began researching encrypted communication, secure networks, and the dark web. Her initial trepidation about technology, her mild frustration with pop-up ads and software updates, was replaced by a fierce, focused need to learn. She spent days reading articles, watching tutorials, and practicing with privacy tools like Tor and Signal. Her neat, orderly life, once filled with the Dewey Decimal System, was now filled with IP addresses, encryption keys, and virtual private networks. She created a new, anonymous identity, Archivist 11. The number was for Leo's birthday. She started frequenting forums dedicated to medical device safety, patient advocacy, and even conspiracy theories, not as a participant, but as a lurker, a digital observer. She wasn't looking for explicit mentions of OmniMed. She knew those would be scrubbed. She was looking for patterns in the language of grief, specific phrases, shared medical jargon, a particular kind of desperate questioning that echoed the post from Broken Heart Dad. After weeks of searching, she found a thread on an encrypted messaging board dedicated to victims of corporate malfeasance. The post was coded. It talked about a fruit company's faulty smartwatch for Little League players. But the details were there. The sudden collapse, the silent device, the aggressive NDAs. Alina's heart hammered in her chest. Following a series of carefully worded private instructions from the original poster, she found her way into a secure, invitation-only chat group. The group was called The Quiet Ones. There were 14 members. For the first few days, Alina simply read, scrolling through months of conversations. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. A 7-year-old girl in Texas who collapsed during a dance recital. A 12-year-old boy in Oregon who died in his sleep. a 9-year-old in Florida who had a cardiac event during a swim meet. In every case, an Omni band had been on their wrist. In every case, OmniMed had approached the family with a large settlement and an ironclad NDA. In every case, the families had been too devastated, too intimidated, and too financially broken to refuse. They had signed, and they were terrified. They have a clause, one user, Soccer Mom 8, wrote. They can sue us for 10 times the settlement amount if we talk. We'd lose our house, everything. My lawyer said we had no chance, wrote another, just grieving. He said they'd make our lives a living hell. They'd say our son had a secret drug problem or something. He was 11. The group was a place of shared sorrow, but it was paralyzed by fear. They were 14 separate islands of grief, connected by a digital sea of terror. The power of Julian Croft and OmniMed was palpable even here, in this hidden corner of the internet. They had successfully atomized their victims, isolating them from each other and silencing them with money and fear. The group existed as a support system, but the thought of taking action, of fighting back, was dismissed as a fantasy. They were the quiet ones because they had no choice. Alina, under her Archivist 11 persona, began to contribute. She didn't share her story, not yet. Instead, she did what she did best. She provided information. She shared public articles on how NDAs could be challenged. She posted legal precedents where whistleblowers had been protected. She created and shared guides on how to communicate securely, how to check for digital surveillance. She was planting seeds of empowerment, using her librarian skills to build a small arsenal of knowledge. Slowly, the tone of the group began to shift. Her calm, methodical confidence was infectious. The members started asking questions. They started to see themselves not just as victims, but as potential witnesses. Just as a spark of hope was igniting, OmniMed's legal team struck. A letter arrived at Alina's home, this one on stiff, intimidating stationery from a high-priced law firm. It was not a settlement offer. It was a warning. The letter mentioned that it had come to their attention that disgruntled individuals might be disseminating misinformation about their products. It didn't mention her by name in relation to the group, but its arrival was no coincidence. It was a shot across the bow. It went on to remind her, in no uncertain terms, of the severe legal penalties for defamation, libel, and slander. It spoke of their vigorous defense of their reputation and their unlimited resources in pursuing legal action against those who would maliciously tarnish their good name. It was a thinly veiled threat, a legal document designed to terrify a 68-year-old retiree into silence. The message was clear. We see you. We know you didn't sign, and we will crush you. That night in the Quiet Ones chat, the panic was electric. They sent me a letter, Soccer Mom 8 typed. My husband wants out. He's terrified. Me too, another user echoed. How did they find us? Alina sat in the darkness of her study, the threatening letter on her desk. The fear in the chat was a real, tangible thing. She could feel the fragile network she was building begin to fray. Julian Croft didn't even have to know who they were. His power was in the abstract terror his company represented. He was a phantom, a name on a corporate letterhead, but his influence reached into their homes, into their lives, and squeezed. Alina felt the weight of their fear on her shoulders. She had led them to this point, had given them a flicker of hope. And now the giant they were considering fighting had turned and looked in their direction. For the first time, Alina Vance felt a tremor of fear herself. But beneath the fear, that cold, hard resolve was solidifying into something new, something sharper. She wasn't just investigating anymore. She was in a fight, and she was not going to lose. The turning point of any great struggle isn't the first blow you land. It's the moment you receive a blow and decide to stand your ground. This is where the story takes a turn I didn't see coming the first time I heard it. Because what Alina did next, it's not something you'd expect from a grandmother who used to spend her days cataloging books. She was about to go from defense to offense. Just as the fear in the Quiet Ones chat reached its peak, a new message popped up on Alina's secure messaging app. It wasn't from the group. It was a direct message from a user she didn't recognize. The username was simple: Prometheus. Archivist 11, the message read. You are asking the right questions, but you are looking in the wrong places. They have buried the bodies deep. Eleanor's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her heart pounding. This was different from the fearful whispers of the other victims. This felt internal. "Who is this?" she typed back. The reply was immediate. "A ghost in the machine. Someone who helped build the tomb and now wants to tear it down. If you are serious, we can talk, but not here. Download this." A link followed, leading to a highly secure, peer-to-peer encrypted chat client. No servers, no central authority, untraceable. Eleanor spent an hour researching the software before she installed it. It was the digital equivalent of a secret, soundproof room. When she logged in, Prometheus was already there. "You're cautious," his first message read. "Good." Over the next few days, they communicated in cautious, stilted bursts. Prometheus revealed he was a former software engineer at OmniMed. He had been on the team that developed the firmware for the Omni-Band's alert system. He was consumed by guilt. "We knew," he typed, the words appearing on Eleanor's screen like digital confessions. "We knew there was a flaw." He explained it in technical detail that Eleanor, with her newfound knowledge, could just about grasp. The alert system was software-based. To save battery life, a critical marketing point, the algorithm that monitored the heart rate data didn't run continuously. It ran in cycles. It would collect data for 5 seconds, then sleep for 20. This 20-second gap, designed to give the Omni-Band its week-long battery life, was a fatal flaw. A sudden, catastrophic cardiac event, like the one Leo had suffered, could occur entirely within that sleep cycle. The device would never even know. "We raised it," Prometheus wrote. "My team lead, he practically begged them to delay the launch. We said it was a 1 in a million chance, but that millions of kids would be wearing these. The math was not on our side." "What happened?" Eleanor typed, her hands shaking slightly. "Julian Croft happened," the message appeared. "He came to the meeting himself. The CEO, he didn't want to hear about flaws, he wanted to hear about market share. Our competitor, BioLife, was a month away from launching their own device. Croft said, 'We do not lose to BioLife.' He said the risk was statistically acceptable. He told us to push the firmware update and prepare for launch." There it was, the cold, corporate calculus that had killed her grandson. A statistically acceptable loss. That's what Leo was. A rounding error in a profit projection. The grief that had been a dull ache in Eleanor's chest now burned with a cold, white-hot flame. "I need proof," she typed. "That's why I'm here," Prometheus replied. He sent her the first file. It was an internal company document, a risk assessment matrix for the Omni-Band project. She scrolled down the color-coded chart until she found it. A single line item, flagged in yellow for low probability, high impact. The description read, "Spontaneous cardiac event occurring during sensor sleep cycle." And in the next column, under mitigation strategy, were 2 chilling words. Monitor market. They weren't going to fix it. They were going to watch and see how many children died before it became a PR problem. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. She leaned back in her chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the tears welling in her eyes. But these weren't the tears of a grieving grandmother anymore. They were tears of rage. She finally had it. The truth. It wasn't a hunch, it wasn't a deleted forum post. It was a weapon. This document changed everything. It transformed her quiet investigation into a focused, methodical plan of attack. Her purpose, which had been hazy and ill-defined, now came into sharp, crystalline focus. She wasn't just trying to understand what happened to Leo anymore. She was going to make sure everyone knew. She was going to hold Julian Croft accountable. She started a new, encrypted folder on her computer. She named it Leo's Archive. Into it, she placed the risk assessment matrix. It was the first piece of her collection. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that it would not be the last. For the other parents in the quiet ones, the threat from OmniMed's lawyers had a chilling effect. Their already fragile hope was dwindling. But for Eleanor, the threat, combined with the proof from Prometheus, acted as a catalyst. She was no longer just a participant in the group. She became its center of gravity. "He's threatening us because he's afraid," she wrote in the chat, under her Archivist 11 alias. "He's afraid because he knows he is guilty. I have proof." She didn't share the document, not yet. It was too dangerous. But her certainty, her absolute conviction, cut through the panic. She spent hours talking to each member individually, using her calm, librarian's logic to soothe their fears and build their trust. She explained the difference between libel and speaking the truth. She taught them how to preserve their own evidence, the device, the packaging, any correspondence from OmniMed. She was building a case, piece by piece, witness by witness. Her quiet study, filled with books on literature and history, was now a command center for a digital insurgency. The grief that had once isolated her had become the very thing that connected her to these other broken families, forging a bond that corporate threats could not sever. The archivist was building her army, one terrified, grieving parent at a time. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, Julian Croft, a titan of industry with a skyscraper headquarters and an army of lawyers, obsessed with his public image and stock price. On the other, Eleanor Vance, a retired librarian in a quiet suburban home, armed with a single PDF file and the unshakable resolve of a grandmother who had been pushed too far. The war for the truth had begun. Julian Croft wasn't used to things he couldn't control. He lived in a world of curated data, of projected earnings and predictable market forces. The news of a potential internal leak and a growing online chatter, however faint, was an anomaly he could not tolerate. It was an imperfection on the flawless canvas of his success. In the sterile, panoramic boardroom on the 50th floor of the OmniMed Tower, Croft addressed his senior legal and security teams. He was a man who radiated an almost violent stillness. Dressed in a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His disapproval was a physical force in the room. "There is a loose thread," he said, his voice as cool and polished as the glass table before him. "A small but persistent digital murmur. I want it silenced. Permanently." His head of security, a former federal agent with a jaw like a bulldog, presented his findings. "We've tracked anomalous data access to a former engineer, a man named David Chen. He was part of the original firmware team. He resigned 6 months ago, citing ethical concerns. We believe he is our Prometheus." "Find him," Croft said simply. "We're already working on it," the security head replied. "But there's another problem. This Archivist 11 character, she's smart. She's using encrypted channels, bouncing her signal. She's organized a small group of the other families." The general counsel, a sharp woman named Harriet, spoke up. "The families who signed NDAs are a manageable risk, but this archivist, if she's the one who refused the settlement, the Vance case, she's a different problem. She's unconstrained." "Then constrain her," Croft said, his eyes narrowing. "I want a full court press. Launch an internal investigation, a top-to-bottom audit. Let it be known that we will find the source of this leak and the consequences will be biblical. As for the online group," he turned to Harriet, "can we find out who they are?" "It would be difficult and slow to penetrate their encrypted network," Harriet admitted. "But there is another way, a John Doe lawsuit. We file suit against unnamed individuals for defamation and conspiracy to harm our business. The suit itself is just a tool. It gives us the power of subpoena. We can go to the service providers, the messaging app companies, and legally compel them to turn over user data. IP addresses, names, anything they have. It will cause panic. It will flush them out." Croft nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Do it, and make it loud. I want a press release. OmniMed Solutions takes action against malicious online smear campaign. Frame them as conspiracy theorists. Discredit them before they can even speak." The news of the John Doe lawsuit hit, the quiet ones like a bomb. A link to the press release was posted in the chat, and the fragile community Eleanor had been carefully nurturing fractured almost instantly. The corporate jargon of the lawsuit, with its talk of malicious intent and economic damages, was terrifying. The chat filled with frantic messages. "They're coming for us. I told you this was a mistake. My wife is having a panic attack. I'm deleting my account." One member, the father of the girl who had collapsed at her dance recital, was particularly undone. "They're going to take our house. We can't fight this. We caw." Eleanor worked tirelessly to hold the group together. "This is a scare tactic," she wrote, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It's a fishing expedition. They don't know who we are. If we stay quiet and secure, they have nothing. But her words were ringing hollow against the very real threat of legal and financial ruin. The final blow came 2 days later. That family, the one whose father had been panicking, released a public statement through a lawyer. It was posted on a major news wire. The statement praised OmniMed's compassion and generosity. It denounced the dangerous and unfounded conspiracy theories circulating online and affirmed their belief that their daughter's death was a tragic, unavoidable event. It ended by stating they had reached a new, confidential settlement with the company. Julian Croft had found their weakest link and crushed it. He had taken one of their own and turned them into a mouthpiece for his corporate narrative. He had paid them to call their fellow victims liars. Eleanor stared at the news article on her screen, a profound sense of cold settling in her stomach. She felt the walls closing in. The weight of the remaining family's fear was immense. She was their archivist, their source of strength, but she could feel their trust eroding, washed away by a tide of corporate power. Was she leading them to justice or to their own destruction? The silence in her house returned, deeper and more menacing than before. She looked at the picture of Leo on her desk, his bright, innocent smile a stark contrast to the dark, complex world she now inhabited. The path to justice was proving to be a lonely, treacherous road, and for the first time she felt truly, utterly alone. And right here, this is the part that gets me. Can you imagine that pressure? To have the lives and financial security of a dozen other grieving families resting on your shoulders. Julian Croft wasn't just fighting with lawyers, he was weaponizing fear. He was turning victims against each other. This is where a lesser person would have given up. They would have deleted the files, thrown the computer in a river, and tried to forget. But Eleanor Vance was not a lesser person. She was a librarian. And her archive was about to become complete. The public capitulation of the other family sent a shockwave of despair through the remnants of the quiet ones. The chat, once a hive of cautious hope, fell eerily silent. One by one, the usernames went dark as members deleted their accounts, retreating back into their isolated worlds of grief and fear. Soon, only 3 remained. Archivist 11, the user Soccer Mom 8, whose real name was Maria, and an older man who went by Just Grieving, named Robert. Eleanor's digital sanctuary had been decimated. As she sat in the oppressive silence of her study, another message alert chimed from the secure app. It was Prometheus. His tone was no longer calm or confessional. It was frantic. They know it's me. The internal audit is a sham. It's targeted. They've been logging my network activity for weeks. I have to get out. Now. What do you mean? Eleanor typed, her stomach tightening. I mean disappear. New name, new life, another country. They have a security team that plays for keeps. I can't risk it. They're coming for my devices. I have maybe an hour. I'm so sorry, Eleanor wrote, a genuine pang of fear for this anonymous stranger who had risked everything. Don't be sorry, be ready, the reply flashed on her screen. I've been compiling everything, not just the risk assessment. Everything, it's the whole damn story. I'm sending it to you now. It's a massive file, heavily encrypted. The password is the project code name for the alert system firmware. It was Project Icarus. Of course, Croft would pick something so arrogant. A progress bar appeared on Eleanor's screen. A massive data dump was being transferred directly to her secure drive. Prometheus, David, thank you, she typed. Don't thank me, he wrote back. Just burn them to the ground. You're the archivist, Eleanor. It's all yours now. You're the sole keeper of the truth. Don't let them bury it. Then a final message. They're here. Goodbye. And the user, Prometheus, went offline forever. Eleanor stared at the screen, her breath caught in her throat. The progress bar hit 100%. The file, a single, dense block of encrypted data labeled Icarus, Z, sat on her desktop. It felt heavier than any book she had ever held. She was no longer just a researcher or an organizer. She was a witness, the sole inheritor of a corporate crime. The torch had been passed, not by choice, but by necessity. With trembling fingers, she typed in the password, Project Icarus. The archive unspooled before her. It was a digital labyrinth of corporate malfeasance. There were thousands of internal emails. She saw the initial excited chatter about the project, the optimism, the ambition. Then, the first reports from the engineers about the battery-saving sleep cycle flaw. She read the desperate pleas from David Chen's team lead to delay the launch. And then she saw the emails from Julian Croft himself. The market does not wait for perfection, one read. BioLife is breathing down our necks. The risk is marginal and theoretical. We launch on schedule. Another, in response to legal concerns about future liability, was even more chilling. We have a robust legal strategy for these scenarios. Settle quickly, enforce silence. It's a line item in the budget, nothing more. The archive contained more. It had the full marketing strategy, which explicitly focused on the unfailing alert system. It had early suppressed test results showing the 20-second data gap. And most damning of all, it had a folder named Managed Cases. Inside was a list of 15 names, 15 children. Beside each name was a case file number and a settlement amount. Leo's name was on the list, so was the daughter of Broken Heart Dad. So were the children of every member of the Quiet Ones. Elinor felt a profound, clarifying calm settle over her. The weight of fear was gone, replaced by the unshakable gravity of her purpose. She was the archivist, and this was her collection. She wasn't leading a group anymore. She wasn't trying to convince frightened people to be brave. The responsibility was hers and hers alone. She closed the files and took a deep breath. She wouldn't just leak this to one place. A single leak could be contained, spun, dismissed as a disgruntled employee's revenge. No, this had to be a flood, an inescapable, reputation-destroying deluge. For the next 48 hours, Elinor didn't sleep. She worked with the quiet, intense focus of a librarian preparing a priceless collection for exhibition. She sorted the files into clear, digestible narratives. She wrote a cover letter, a calm, factual summary of the archive's contents, signed simply, "The Archivist." She created separate, curated packages of information. The Croft package contained his personal emails, the ones where he explicitly overrode safety concerns for profit. This she addressed to the two most respected, hard-hitting investigative journalists in the country. The technical package contained the firmware specifications, the suppressed test results, and the engineer's warnings. This was for a federal regulator, the agency responsible for overseeing medical device safety. The victims package contained the list of silenced families, stripped of their personal information, but showing the pattern of NDAs and settlements. This was for a powerful consumer advocacy group known for its aggressive class action lawsuits. She uploaded each package to a separate, anonymous file hosting service. She scheduled the emails to be sent simultaneously in 2 days' time, at 9:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 minute after the stock market opened. A coordinated, multi-pronged attack. A data leak designed not just to expose, but to dismantle. As she finalized the last email, she looked again at the photo of Leo. His bright smile seemed to reach her across the void. Her grief was still a part of her, a deep, permanent ache, but it was no longer a suffocating silence. It was a resonating chord, the deep note that gave purpose to her every action. She was building a different kind of monument for him, not one of stone or bronze, but one of indelible, irrefutable truth. The archivist was finally ready to publish. The morning of the leak, Elinor sat at her desk, a simple mug of black coffee in her hand. The house was still, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was the calm before the storm she herself had created. At 9:01 a.m., her computer sent the emails. The archive, Leo's archive, was now in the world. There was no immediate explosion. The first hour was an exercise in excruciating patience. She resisted the urge to constantly refresh news sites. She simply sat, her gaze alternating between the blank screen and Leo's smiling face. She had done her work. She had built the archive and opened its doors. Now she could only wait for the world to come and read. At 10:17 a.m., the first tremor hit. An alert from a major news outlet popped up on her phone. The headline was stark. Leaked documents allege OmniMed knew of fatal flaw in popular child health monitor. Elinor clicked the link. The story was there, laid out with devastating clarity. It quoted directly from Julian Croft's emails. It cited the risk assessment matrix, Project Icarus. The journalist she had contacted had worked fast. Within minutes, it was a cascade. The second journalist published their story, focusing on the corporate culture of cover-ups. The federal regulator, spurred into action by the technical package, released a public statement announcing an immediate, formal investigation into OmniMed Solutions and its flagship product, the OmniBand. They recommended that all parents immediately stop using the device. On a financial news channel playing silently on her tablet, Elena watched the OmniMed stock ticker. It was a vertical red line, plunging downward in real time. OMNI, minus 34%, minus 42%. By noon, it was the lead story on every news network. The consumer advocacy group announced it was actively seeking families to join a massive class action lawsuit, citing the managed cases list as evidence of a systemic conspiracy to defraud and endanger the public. By 3:00 p.m., OmniMed's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Before the market closed, they issued a press release. Julian Croft was resigning as CEO, effective immediately, pending the results of the federal and an internal investigation. His statistically acceptable loss had become a personally unacceptable catastrophe. The empire built on secrets and silence was crumbling under the weight of a single, well-organized archive. Elena watched it all unfold not with triumph, but with a quiet, somber sense of completion. There was no joy, no thrill of victory. There was only the profound, resonant satisfaction of a ledger being balanced, of a story long suppressed, finally being told correctly. She closed her laptop, the noise of the news fading into the background. She turned to her other monitor, the one with the secure chat client still open. The group, the quiet ones, was quiet no more. Frightened members who had fled were slowly, cautiously returning, drawn by the news. Maria and Robert were already there. "Did you see?" Maria typed. "It's everywhere, they're calling him a monster." "The regulator just recalled the OmniBand," Robert added. "It's over." Then a new message appeared, from a user who had been silent for weeks. "My NDA, is it worthless now? Can I finally talk about my son?" Elena, the Archivist 11, began to type. "Yes," she wrote. "You can talk now, we all can." A new channel appeared in the group, created by Maria. It was called The Voices. One by one, they began to post pictures of their children, their real names, their stories finally told in their own words without fear. The digital space that was once a vessel for silent terror was transformed into a living memorial, a testament to the children they had lost and the truth they had finally reclaimed. Elena leaned back in her chair, looking at the picture of Leo. Her grief was still there, a soft, familiar ache. It always would be. But it was no longer a suffocating shroud. It was a space, and in that space something new had been built. A community, a legacy, justice. Her grandson's death had not been a meaningless, random event. It was not a statistical anomaly. It was a catalyst. His brief, bright life had been given a weight and a meaning that would save countless others. The silence in the house was finally peaceful. The archivist's work was done. "You know, when I first heard this story, I thought it was about revenge. And in a way, it is. But the more I think about it, the more I realize it's about transformation. Elena didn't just get even, she got free. She transformed her own paralyzing grief into a catalyst for justice, and in doing so, she freed dozens of other families from the prison of silence that had been built around them." What makes this story so powerful isn't the downfall of a corrupt CEO. It's the quiet, methodical courage of a woman who refused to let her grandson's memory be reduced to a line item in a budget. She taught us that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as a librarian, late at night, meticulously organizing the truth. So what do you think? Was this justice, or was it the most perfect form of revenge? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Elena's shoes? This community on revenge pains is special because we grapple with these questions together. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button because there are more stories of justice that need to be told. I'm Serena, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.